Welcome back, my Misfit-rinos. So I'm your host, Luna Munoz, and today I'm wearing my The World Transformed t-shirt. We're going to be very disruptive today, but with joy and movement and everything in between, and movement in every single way that we can speak about that. Movements, protests, resistance. I have a really special guest today. I'm your host. I was in academia. I was the OG academic misfit. My kid's gonna cringe at me speaking like this. But yeah, I moved from the US where I did my PhD, moved to Europe, Sweden to do my postdoc. I moved to the UK, and it was all in search of a place that would have me, a place where I would fit in, a place where I would feel more myself and be able to do the research that I really felt was important with a team that, I felt accepted by. And I found my team, but academia did not value our collective power. So I left academia 2021, and actually, it's almost been a year, not a year, it's been about 3 years, an anniversary that I'm celebrating. About this time, 3 years ago, is when I wrote a DM to somebody and said, I'm not going to take this position that I had accepted in academia. I'm instead going to start my own business. I don't know what that means. And I'm either going to succeed or die trying. So here I am, 3 years later, resisting. And so, yes, let's talk to our guest and welcome to Georgiana.
Hi, Luna. So great
Welcome.
to be here with you.
I know, I'm so excited for this because we met not thinking that we were going to be doing a podcast. We were meeting under different circumstances, and so I'm really excited. So, yeah, introduce yourself and let everybody know, your background, and then we can get started.
Yeah, Luna. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's both exciting, a little bit scary. After 5, 6 months, I'm no longer in academia because I just finished the last project, and I think on rather shaky grounds, to say the least. And so it does feel very exciting to look back and reach back, especially after forcing a pause that I needed. And I'm still being radical about caring about my space, and until I can see clear again what direction my life is taking. But yeah, I want to thank you first, actually, for being such supportive partner in crime along the way from the moment we met. Was it in Women of Academia, one of these women
Yes,
support the support group for women in academia, right?
yes.
So it was about 2 years ago that I was looking for reviewers because I got to the end of editing my film, my documentary, criticizing academia and how we live in academia.
Mm.
And I was actually looking back then for people reviewing it and telling us what they saw in the film, whether that spoke to their heart or maybe not, or whether the content was sound, whether they found themselves in important ways in it. And you are one of the, I think, around 70 reviewers from all
Wow.
over the world. And I think 90 in total, because we also had 3 focused groups to test for different types of audiences. And I don't know if I've ever thanked you enough, and as clearly as I want to do now, for your viewing. At that moment, we didn't know if we can project the documentary in rooms, if it was too critical,
Mm.
if they are going to, I don't know, shut us down entirely, if the content is actually really speaking to a situation in an important way. And so your presence really alongside everyone else in that moment before the launch has convinced a young first-timer group, including students, the younger was 19,
Wow.
that, hey, we can fly with this. We can fly with this. Let's do this. So testimony like yours, reviews like yours, identifying with so much content, so genuinely, put in a written form, in a way that we could all sit around the table and look at it. It made us feel like we can fly with this. So Luna, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this and for following through with us, with the process, with launching actually the documentary, touring Europe with it, and getting in trouble for it.
If
We
it
are
doesn't
now
have
no longer
trouble.
a first. We are no longer first timers making a documentary, but a first timers troublemakers too. Eventually.
I mean, I'm so impressed with you. You know, I mean, taking 70 reviewers, focus groups, like the amount of care that you've taken, and I know that you've had a lot of care in the process of interviewing people as well and safeguarding their well-being in the process. I feel like it's more care than probably academia has afforded us in like, you know, in all of academia, in all of its history combined.
Thanks, Luna. I tried my best. I was so scared, and I also didn't. I wanted to make sure everything was ruling, everyone was comfortable, things were spoken 3 times before done with everyone, preparing every member of the staff to hearing tough stories, speaking with them repeatedly and double checking, triple checking if they can sit on that set, speaking, for example, about suicide in academia or topics that are very hard, which also informed them what might happen to them after this movie. Everyone wanted to be there all the time and return to the set and return to their task. Everyone also took pauses because it was also very difficult to do. Yeah. But when it comes to the review process, we were actually very surprised ourselves. So it was during COVID time. The documentary, I think, also does a good job in putting it in a historical perspective, taking also on how we are doing our work in the COVID period. Ooh. With everything that it took.
Georgiana, you should tell people what is the documentary and what is it about?
Oh, yes. Oh my God, I got into the review process and without even saying what it is about. So the documentary, it's been, the title is Academic Pussy _Pussy. Pussy as in vagina, but don't get me wrong there, or do, because that's part of the game. So in reality, it's the Hungarian pussy, written with SZ. And unlike the English sound of it, is actually really nothing vulgar. But there is a lot of this vulgarity in the world, and it's also catchy. And so it is taking words and changing their meanings in the process. It's getting lost in translation together. So pussy in Hungarian, it's actually a very affectionate word standing for hello and goodbye, and it comes with a cheek on the kiss or with a kiss on the cheek. And because I did my PhD in Budapest at Central European University, which moved to Vienna after a very strong confrontation with the government on mainly the ground of liberally liberal, but also on topics such as migration and gender, which I've seen replicated around Europe. It's a little bit of a script, I feel, right now. It's a moral battleground on which politics is done in between governments and institutions. I've seen similarly done in, although not to the same degree and extent, in Denmark, and I was shocked. That was in my first job afterwards. But anyway, going back to the title, so I started making the documentary with the fear that I might not be let to pursue in academia. People told me, if you go on with this idea, Georgie, you may not ever get a job in academia. And so why not call it pussy? Is it hello or goodbye? I can't decide that. And I've led my work fearing all the time. So it's fair to say that. But also thinking, so nicely about hello and goodbye, and maybe none of them is definitive. Maybe you're working through our hellos and goodbyes, and at every time we add something that matters to the table and we discuss it. And that was the point. I want to talk about this, the way we live and the way we do things in academia, the way the structure shapes us, the way it makes us hypermobile. So hypermobility, as I'm a migration and movement scholar, was one of the central elements. But also that kind of mobility that happens under very precarious circumstances, economic circumstances, temporary contracts. In every country I looked at, there was a different constellation of these elements, neoliberal type of management of programs, universities, and people's lives. At the end, I was interested to speak about people's life. The last unit, how are you doing? Tell me about that. And so the main point, the main concept I looked at coming from my own paper was this concept of being stuck in movement, which I've been living through for almost 2 decades as an academic. So I have my luggage in Denmark. I picked it up after 4 years. Still have to pick up my luggage at my friend's place in Turkey. I
Yes.
now have my luggage in 3 countries, and I'm with a suitcase because I can no longer manage running after the next contract, the new location, and just being unable to stop somewhere. I began this kind of movement so enthusiastic, especially with these European programs, Erasmus. Everyone knows about Erasmus, right? We had some of the best time in our life. But then that was at 20. When you get towards 40s and you realize you still cannot, actually, you can't stop. Because if you stop, you're out of the game. Then
Yes.
you start turning around. What are the rules that are increasingly making us, and what was the third part I looked at, vulnerable? So what are the circumstances that make us hypermobile while also precarious, while also some of us extremely vulnerable? And so I looked at mental health in academia as well, which is it's a crisis, a real crisis. Academics are 2-3-fold more sick, mentally ill than the general population. So I thought we need to talk about that.
Yes.
And so when I produce so much content about how people are and telling incredible stories that were hard to edit, hard to chop, every story had so much to add. And I've had more people wanting to talk to me at some point than the start was hard. People were like running away, but also I think they needed to understand my commitment to it. They needed to put trust in me because you're giving your story as a, I don't know, top professor in Europe to your student who is now Marie Curie fellow and the first time director with the first timer team entirely. We were, let's do this, you know. And
What's your background? What's your PhD in? Because I feel like a lot of the subject matter and the way that you positioned yourself in the work was really interesting. So I'm very curious on your background.
so I've had some background in communications and filmmaking, which I didn't fully exploit, but it got me an idea of the entire process. Luckily, I had that. But as an academic background, I think of myself as a philosopher. And I have studied normative political theory, so political philosophy, coming from what we call the analytical school, the Anglo-Saxon tendencies that kind of have a fight with the continentals. They don't recognize each other as proper philosopher, and either one. I think I fall somewhere in the middle, except I am a lot more interested in every other discipline and how knowledge somehow connects into responding to bigger questions. So in a way, I'm trying to pick on the methodology that ancient philosophers were using back then. And that was the case for a long time, actually, until the 19th century. Back then, there was no division between disciplines. Only after 19th century, we divided in social science, hard science, and then started dividing knowledge in very, very specialized types of units. So much that I think critically about it right now, I can almost barely speak to another philosopher, even from my same analytical school, who just works on another topic, because you need to be hyper specialized in a very niche nowadays. And I cannot put up with this like that. In fact, I've tried to publish across all sorts of fields. I'm interested in relating to all sorts of colleagues from all sorts of disciplines, and I think that is a lot more helpful. Although it's penalizing within this current system that one has this large, wide angle on what they do. But for the purpose of my film, this was actually really great, because I had people from higher education, from anthropology, from psychology, from trauma studies, from from so many disciplines, but unified under the umbrella of one focus, the ethical focus. So my idea as a political philosopher is that I'm looking at what are the structures within which we live, what could be a good way of living from here on. But in this documentary, of course, I couldn't also look at the positive thesis. I could do this work in a next part. I looked and mapped the problems, because you need to define, map the problems. How are people affected? And tell me your stories. So that's the part that we've done. When I reach to moments like the review process, when we also got in contact through the academic women, the support group for women in academia. I'm not sure if that's the exact name.
Women in Academia Support Network, yes.
There you are. So at that stage, we were launching for the first time out of the participant production narrow with team into out to colleagues to see, what do you feel, what do you think this is. We were trembling, and you know what happened, Luna? This is so incredible, and I want to stress this point. In that moment, because it was also COVID times, people were exhausted. You know how we had too much on us, general, to switch to systems, everyone was exhausted, and journals would barely be able to secure reviewers, because people bail out of reviews. Is free work, is exploited work. It adds nothing to my CV. It's service work that, if I can serve, is fine, but I can barely survive now. So people were, including us, we were running a special issue in parallel with some colleagues, which took us 2 years to come out because of the slow process. Anyway, when I proposed documentary on platforms like you saw publicly, like Women's Support Network and such, or I address people personally, hey, I am working on this documentary. It's about hypermobility, precarity, and vulnerability in academia. Would you like to review our product? You know, the way I addressed you. Luna, we had 3 reviewers coming a day.
Wow.
For a month, all our team members, the music department, the editor, me as the director and leading ideas, the content is being reviewed. People were enthusiastic to be there. And like, no one pays you for a review, and you're even running away from all the reviews you can run away from. Yet people wanted to, and some people ended up saying, until the final edit, I would like to see the movie again and give you one more report. People gave us 3 reports. I was thinking, this is a research paper quantity of work you've done to help us. And it was really incredible. I think there was a great energy that proved this, usual saying, oh, wait to be a professor and then you're stable enough to raise a critique without being attacked and all of that. People from all corners wanted to be there, including those professors. But at this stage, I didn't have anything to convince them with. I wasn't, in a higher position. I wasn't proposing work. I wasn't proposing a continuation. If anything, it could be even a suicidal type of action. And I'm saying this maybe inappropriately, because then we actually deal with suicide, real
Mm,
suicide. But people wanted to see this team that is young, that believes in change, running, and they wanted to put their name with us,
mm,
and just so many reviews, just so many as a number of people who willingly put their time towards the project, is something that I will never be grateful enough, because it was not just their time and their dedication and the courage it gave us at the moment, but as every project, you run into a new phase that gives you a lot of challenges.
mm.
And that was a stage that was very important,
Yeah.
to launch it, to have the courage to launch it, actually. And so, yes, thank you very much for being one of the people who wanted to see what is this about, and let me watch your movie before is running in classrooms and cinemas.
Yes.
So
And I think part of that was your story. When you get a review request, it's not, you don't get a story about the authors. Do you know what I mean? But I'm pretty sure I could go back and look at your request, but throughout the archive that is Facebook. But I think there was a little bit about your story and why you wanted to do this. And I think it's that care that you were showing, that passion that you were showing, that people responded to. And I think and you were doing it from the heart rather than what we know journals are just making money, right? So it's a completely different request on your time, on your energy. I felt like energized watching the film rather than feeling this. It's interesting how we both have these backgrounds where we have never, I don't know if you've told people, but I never really told anybody in academia that I worked for Warner Brother Records in Hollywood, and things like this. And so when you said I'm making a film, I was like, well, we used to watch films on the Burbank, studio lot, I mean, the sound was amazing. So it just made every film, that even like the bad ones, look good. But when you said that, I was like, oh, this is kind of some of my old passion as well. I worked at Tower Records. I worked for Warner Brother. Um, there's something about the visual medium, and there's something that I felt, this is very creative and new and can speak to a lot more people using innovative methods. Whereas I think a lot of academia is based on iterative, kind of technology, and innovation is kind of iterative. It's not really, yeah, don't be too crazy with your research ideas, right? It needs to have a basis on what's shown before, right? And it sometimes like makes you feel like you can't do really boundary pushing projects. So I love that. And so I'm curious also about the Marie Curie. Is that how you sold it? Like how did that come about, that you put this project together and got funding?
yeah. Yeah, so Luna, like you said, I was never going to gain anything from the movie other than the change I wanted, really.
Mm,
First, in academia, yes, I've done it with the Marie Curie, and that is because I've returned to academia after a giant burnout in an extremely difficult situation in which a lot of people are finding themselves. I found out, so it was an extraordinary. But when it happened to me, it almost killed me literally, and I thought it was my fault. I wasn't good enough or resilient enough, and all these things. So I just lashed out, and I moved in a commune in Christiania, where I spent 6 months, and where also where the pandemic found me, in an
mm,
extremely vulnerable situation. Believe it or not, welfare-based country that gives no welfare support to a specialized academic who moved there to work for their primary university in the country, right? Copenhagen University. And so I came out with this idea because I wanted to fight back. I wanted the situation to not be replicated to other people,
mm,
but I wanted to understand it and to heal through the situation myself. So now, a Marie Curie is actually a very, very good way to begin if you can earn one. That was my main motivation for earning one in on the side of also advancing my research agenda and looking at developing, but this time developing some of these concepts in a different form, for example, the film. So while this is allowed, you also have a fund, a research fund, that is most generous than any other fund existing in academia, though really difficult to make a movie with that kind of fund. So that's been a little bit of a struggle. Also because the war at the same time, wars, and the pandemic have raised the inflation we all feel, right? So my money became even a smaller amount. But in spite of this, the Marie Curie permits and supports real innovation. And I do think this is real innovation. Now, however, these types of projects end up jeopardizing your position as an academic because they are not highly ranked journals. But that's not the only way you should be assessed in your work, right? So to the present day, having made and spent 3 to 5 years on making a movie is actually penalizing me, even if this is a very, as I think it is, a very, very important movie with some potential to change, to steer a conversation that's open, that's honest, around things we all know about. Our our main what puts a big scene what the reason I put a big signature on this movie is that I've decided to take this conversation from behind the doors where it's safe and launch it out there and try to strive to create a safe place around it.
Yeah.
And so obviously, as you see how I think and speak about it, I believe in what I've done. And after touring Europe with it, I believe this movie should get back right out there and continue steering the conversation that we need to have. Yet I'm doing so, and it's fair to stress the point, without any economic incentives. I didn't want any. I wanted to change so that things like this don't happen to other people. And incredibly, those who united in that fight have had similar feelings. So we've connected on a very vulnerable ground, and which has a very strange power of restarting the human being after trauma they had, but also starting connecting from the ground together with others in a little bit like from the ashes in a way. And so it's powerful what we've managed and tried to put together. But this fully penalizing the director who, regardless of the merit of the movie, even if it were the best or the worst, that's not the point. There is no way to evaluate this movie as actually academic work, even though it's been done with the Marie Curie project, which is one of the most competitive, or I even criticize competition, but what I wanted to say, also one of the most prestigious types of projects, and I criticize prestige too. How am I to talk about it? But you see the point, it's innovative. That I stand for. I think I found.
Yes.
It breaks the ground. It creates new spaces. I speak in first person, like you've noticed in our last event where you were an invited speaker, like a human library. It starts from the person and it goes up to the structure. And how is this social, political, economic structure determining how we relate to one another as people? And how do we raise the criticism to that structure in a way that it serves us well? It is about our well-being is the end point, and what we've learned and how the dialogue between those two dimensions, the micro and the macro dimension.
Yeah.
So yes, it's very fair to say that I've lost everything for this documentary.
Yes.
So please help me. Stop losing and gaining, and I want no other gain but being in a better place collectively together. That's the only thing I want, most obviously, after giving everything I had at my loss. And I would now want to say around 150 people loss. So there's something that doesn't fit in my head. No, it's not right.
No. And I definitely still want you to come to Liverpool and show this movie here. I think it would be, I mean, there's what, 5 universities within Liverpool itself, right? And then Manchester has I don't know how many universities, at least three that I know of. Three big ones. Um, yeah, so I think it's more relevant now. This movie than back. You know what I mean? It's just more and more relevant every day. I think this. What do you like? I really want to ask you about what you're doing, what you've done since, and how it changed your relationship with academia. But also, first, I want to philosophize a little bit around the contrast that the film has, because you talked about how much philosophers are niching down and you have your little expertise. We're very siloed in our knowledge, but we're also siloed in academia. So many closed doors within academia. And I mean, anybody listening, if you haven't read like Sarah Ahmed, like definitely I could read more, but she talks about doors a lot in Complaint, exclamation point. And the film is about, or like to me, a lot of it is about this hypermobility, but it's also about how we heal in community. And academia doesn't allow for us to heal in community often. And your ideas around how you've healed after this project as well.
So I think from me, I passed from, and it would be really great to ask other people who have participated, other participants, what's their story, because obviously I lead my story through theirs, getting theirs, and then I'm also acting a bit as a dictator because I'm the director deciding the line, right? There has to be one assigned. But I'm sure there is so much to the story that they can add and they should be adding. I would be very grateful to learn from their processes too, in open conversation. What happened to us through all this process of fear, of building anew, of healing, if every one of us, and every process is complex and some processes are tragic. And so, but so it started from me feeling really alone. When I burnt out to the ground, almost dying, I felt it was my fault and I was isolated. Academia is not the kind of place where you can talk openly about that, because academia, like every working place, determined by these capitalistic principles and competitive principles, productive principles, force you either silently or not into this position of being inadequate if you don't comply with being productive, for example, is all about being productive. And so why, if I'm not this time, then it has got to be my fault, then I have to hide it. Then we are also working in a world, not just in academia, where being vulnerable is something we hide and even we feel ashamed for. So there's a lot that is deeply ingrained in how we just end up alone. Not that someone specifically does something to you, but more than all of us don't know how to actually deal with this situation, and us ourselves don't know how to let it out. So for me, falling out was the only thing I could do at the time, in the time of the burnout. Contract ended, the university has no longer any responsibility for me, drops me in the middle of a pandemic like they don't even know me. That's totally normal, especially in the fragmentation of work into short contracts. We don't have continuative rights. It's funny how we are like almost objects fitting projects rather than projects fitting our life.
Yes.
And I had a huge upset and need for a revolution. I think it started like this. I started feeling, but when I was there, why is this way? Like just simply asking these questions. And why am I sitting here feeling ashamed? And I sat deeply with all those feelings. That was the beginning for me. But I needed to reconnect back. And what the documentary and this grant has given me, and I'm very grateful for, was the possibility to understand, not just rationally, because rationally I've done my job, I read all the research was on my side. It's not my fault. This is a setting, this is a structure and a culture that needs to change, no doubt. I knew it wasn't my fault. But what the documentary afforded me, I think, was to connect with real people going through similar things in their own country, university, etc., falling together in a one voice type of situation has permitted me to understand psychologically and emotionally accepting the process. So at the end of it, it's been hard, but it's been the best process I could have ever hoped for. I reunited with others. We felt together the tragedy and the loss that this structure we then united into criticizing together by exposing ourselves and our lives, our personal lives. Why is it important to say? Because of the reasons I've just mentioned, we are not allowed to do that. We are allowed to talk with a close friend behind closed doors about feeling this way, about being in one such situations, maybe. And then this person will turn around because they also feel not allowed to talk to it. And then you'd say, tell that to the head of department. He looks like aloof, like doesn't even know himself what to do with it. It's like no one knows. And we've exposed ourselves in wanting to break that silence. It is maybe something we all know about, and some of us have experienced tragically some of this, unfortunately. Many are experiencing it right now, being unwell within those structures, not having enough certainty for what they eat today or tomorrow, and all the situations that we describe in describing our lives. We describe the structure. Like I said, that was my thinking. But I think we've done something really revolutionary in opening the gate to talk. And what I'm campaigning now for, we need safety. We've exposed ourselves. That was actually the last letter I sent to two universities yesterday. We've exposed ourselves. We put our careers and lives in line. Is nothing, shouldn't be revolutionary, but for the times we're in, just it is. We're now vulnerable to attacks. And I would dare to say perhaps even more after the new elections and the new wave of, this bully politics that comes from the United States with the new elections, and reinforcing again those governments that were already looking at the academia as this easy scapegoat to take and destroy and bully a little bit around and defund and whatever. And I think in the present political and social constellation, we are even more endangered as a unit, having done a critical work. But I'm fighting for a safe space to keep the conversation on. And I would like to also say that I've done it from the most vulnerable of positions. Not only I'm precarious myself, now I'm not working because after the end of my contract, it hasn't been easy to secure new funding and a permanent position anywhere. So I'm in shaky grounds myself. It's not just the precarity, but I've also done it with the least possibilities for establishing myself, because my field, the field of philosophy, is actually the most underrepresented in terms of how many women and diverse, in any way we understand the word diverse, people, is mostly men. So mostly white men in the field, more than any other field out there, more than hard science, if you can believe. Is really incredible. So I come from a discipline where I speak as the inadequate person that probably will not fit in her lifetime within those structures. And so I'm even more determined that this critique comes from a very underrepresented positionality. I'm so positioned as to be by default almost inadequate to the profession in which I am qualified for. But why is that for me, compared to any other white male out there, is it such a battle to just exist? To just exist, So I want to exist, I might not be hired by a university to do that job because no matter what I do, no matter how highly qualified I get, I still don't fit. But I now just know it's not my fault.
Yes.
And from this position, I'm pushing back. I'm making space for others, but for now we need a space of safety to keep the conversation going. And it's important it comes from us. It's important it comes from someone like me, I think,
Yeah.
this kind of critique.
Yeah.
Because it would have been just mainstream standard if it came from the mainstream standard, you know? So
And I'm thinking about when you were talking about, you know, your purpose and your activism and the way that you are talking about women and how unsafe and how our bodies in academia are unsafe, and we're exposing ourselves, right, and giving so much of ourselves to academia. You know, what's just happened? What have you done recently that kind of speaks to that?
right, to the event that, yes. Luna, this is still fresh for me. But yes, I've done something, I think, a little bit crazy. And people tell me, don't use that word. You've done something extravagant, something extraordinary. Don't use that term. And I
Ooh.
agree, especially because I agree and disagree. So, um, what I've done, and what's the context? So, there is a narrow context of the documentary at present that I responded to, and there is a global context I responded to. And very interestingly, or maybe just not, the documentary is positioned in between those two things at the moment. So in the documentary, which looks at how academia functions around those topics within the Western world, and I had to limit it to the Western world because that's what I know, that's the world in which I live. But I also wanted to show the personality and the interest and the wide open interest when I was editing the documentary, by being just sensitive to also other types of events happening at the same time of the filming. So give it a flair and a sensitivity to wanting to consider the other. That's much farther away than us, but in a way where there's battles happening in parallel. And so in this sense, the documentary opened a little bit of a window to looking at the effects of COVID, which was a global thing happening. I tried to tease some responses to also include some of that. But one specific event, pardon me, that was happening 2 years ago when I was finishing the documentary, where students and people in Iran, actually the civil society widely, got to a super intense protesting moment of women coming out in the street and burning their hijab and taking their hijab and burning it in the street. And that was because a student, a young person, was killed in one of the protests. And so students started at that moment to taking out their veils, but they would not show their faces. So they would appear on Western media like The Guardian, etc., showing their beautiful hair from behind. And so I've made a scene back then. One of the scenes in the documentary is me walking in a pond, taking everything off and saying, if they can take their veil off, then I'll take everything, and my body stands in line, because it's the same fight in different contexts for different things. I think at the end, the way I understood the fight for taking off clothing obviously doesn't have to do only with the clothing themselves. In this particular context in Iran, of course, there is a full structure why and how this religious type of context pushes down on the civil society, but it is about rights, fundamental rights, fundamental freedoms, and this idea of how much can the government tell me until I just break down and take it off, all of it, you know? So that's how I perceived what was happening back then. And right now there is a case where a student, actually a PhD student, removed her clothes, kind of becoming, it really touched my heart to read for a couple of days news around this woman who, after doing that in a university in Tehran, she is disappeared entirely. I think there was a video by her husband around the fact that she's crazy. So we're getting back to why not crazy, or why yes crazy. And the government declared her crazy, of course. But it's so incredible how a woman can be more threatening than Israel, for example, to a government like this, because it's the change from within. And maybe that is why she's this symbol for freedom in global media, because I've read news in Spanish, in Italian, in English, to see also what are the differences, how the situation is reported. But my heart was pumping with passion for justice thanks to this girl. And so what I did, I just enacted my scene while my documentary is in two ethical committees who are thinking and discussing about, is this right? Did you do this? Did you do that? I'm like, leave me alone. You talk, have your talk. I'm enacting the scene because this is a moment that can't wait on campus. So last week, as you know, the day before, we were supposed to have this meeting, but I was a little bit too shocked by, because it was very, very hard.
Very fresh.
Very fresh, yes. And it was something really hard to do. I cannot possibly imagine what it has been for her to do this, because it was so hard, Luna, so hard. And also such an intense experience. Also, for me, an important experience. I'm actually really glad that I did it. Yeah. So what I did, I just decided to walk naked on campus. I've enacted a scene in a public space where people normally wear all their clothes, all their shame about their body, like that's normal, all the shame that I've given rid of in my process of coming out of ashes, and that for me started in Christiania. I've been for the first time exposed to nudity that has nothing to do with sexuality in that context. And so I'm looping now back to Christiania and what it started for me and why I brought it in the documentary. Because like I said, it was an autoethnographic journey. My journey, meeting others, but it is my journey. And so I've learned how to be naked and appreciate and like my body for what it is, and get rid of all those negative sentiments that were put into me by society. They didn't belong there when I was a child, I would imagine. And so when I started practicing it, and I had to do it for many, many months, up to I think a year, until I could be comfortable around the nudity back there, I was thinking, even when there was no one else in the sauna or on the bridge where I was practicing it in Christiania, why is it that I feel all this shame as if someone is looking at me? There is not even anyone in the sauna. What is happening? And that's where I started my own work with, why do I have these feelings? Is not even related to others, but it is externally, given from the outside, is given to me. I never even question how, and I believe it's a shocking way of protesting, because people find themselves nudity without having done this journey themselves, and I understand that. And so anyway, for me, it has nothing to do with sexuality, walking naked. In this context, it was a very strong political protest, obviously, and it is immersing a body that has dropped everything that Christianity told them about their body, with purity, with shame, with sin, with whatever, everything patriarchy said to her body about her shapes and her size and everything that trends and capitalistic trends on fashion and whatever tell you that you need to be, you're measuring it. You are never made adequate by any of those processes, because they need to exploit this insecurity to building those societal structures on top of you. And there you have a fully liberated woman, which is why it's scary. I understood. I was thinking about Ahu and why is she so scary for the government to declare her crazy? Because in those, in those contexts, doing something like this is really incredible. But
I
was thinking,
can I interrupt you there? I just got an essay through my email. I'm subscribed to Mona Altahawi. I don't know if you've read her work, but her newest
Mona?
Mona Eltahawy. I'll have to write to you.
No. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to spell it exactly. And she just put out some essays on how women who are angry, women, that men are seeing women angry right now across the
Mm-hmm.
world, and that we are never perceived as dangerous. And now, more and more we're seen as dangerous, and we should embrace that danger because yes, we are dangerous. And I love her work. She has one on women and ambition, and her ambition is to be free and awesome, and I love that essay as well. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because it is something that a lot of that is in the discourse right now about the dangerousness of women.
Right, right. It's a very complex conversation. Just as it is, say or not crazy, right? Say this word
Yeah.
or not. So important how we use our terms and how and why and how conscious we are about their language. And
Yes.
I think what it's got to do with showing emotion is that we've gotten so educated into never showing them. Some cultures are more brutal around this than others. For example, in Denmark, when I was working there, I was actually shocked by how people value this composure
Mm.
so much more than actually who they really are in that moment and how they feel. I call it almost like the militarization of feeling. And when this comes out, they are just shocking. I understand how they are shocking because we're not used. And then the way of the system to contain that is by labeling you something and eliminate you, right?
Mm.
But when there is a lot of that, like think from I'm now thinking from the side of my university, right?
Yeah.
They have a crazy woman naked in their backyard who is standing in solidarity with another crazy one, by according to her government in Iran, while they also deal with an ethical proceeding to checking on how things were done for another crazy woman in Austria. I'm using this like this. Think about
In
how
quotes, in
they,
quotes.
like
For
in
people who
quotes,
are just listening, yes, you're using quotes.
using quotes, yes. But now, and then I'll also say a way in which I actually use the term crazy, because I also feel um, so while the typical response is to set you aside, which I think is what happens to Ahud Arieh, the Iranian woman. She just is disappeared from the public space. It's not clear if she will continue her PhD. It's not clear whether the university will accept her back. It's not clear whether she really is mentally ill or unstable the way she was described. She never said another word. So she is literally taken out. But in the so-called West, we do exactly the same to people who are crazy, so quoting crazy, right? In a department where you stop functioning like it happened to me, people start looking at you, like I said earlier, they don't know what to do about it. You feel just inadequate and you feel even alone. And so you get cornered by how our values are set around this and how we are or not educated around dealing with that. Now we've cornered the university globally. So it happened the opposite, right? Like right now, this power, because it's now multiple sources, has, in a way, it speaks on an equal ground to the institution that will just blink with the blink of an eye would disappear you. So no, we are
Yes.
not invisible. We are in your face. And
Yes.
some people even find this inspiring because we all need to get to that point where not only we get to the point of existing with our emotions, but also maybe start the process of learning how to deal with them rather than, pressing down those things, which is what we are used to.
Yeah.
But one way for the listeners who may not see the video, I wanted to say about the word crazy and how I use it. I think it's important for me personally, and I might revise this with time, to appropriate that. So it is important to remind to anyone out there that women who were slightly courageous, they were crazy, or they were witches, and they were literally burned,
Mm.
set on fire, right? So there is
Yes.
a history to how someone who sticks out for for justice, for themselves, for everyone else out there, or just snap out of a system that's literally oppressive, it was easy to take that person out as crazy. I appropriate how historically we are discriminated in that way.
Mm.
And even if it's not conscious, I think there are reminiscences in how
Yeah.
it's dealt with people who show courage, who show these qualities for being moral heroes, what I call in my PhD dissertation, being a moral hero, right? When you take a lot more risk than will probably ever be a payback, or anyway you don't know.
But if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll have some pictures of what Georgiana did. And so Georgie, like what happened on the day, and where, what, I don't know if you can say where it was, but it was at a European university. And so what happened on the day? What did you do? How did it feel? How did people react?
Yeah, okay, so it was a normal day of the week. It was Monday, 11th of November, and that was 9 days later that this woman has done a similar thing in Iran. Her name is actually, she's called by the social media name, and I don't know what her name is. So what I've replicated in a stronger form, because she exited the university in her underwear, and I removed everything. So I arrived on campus. It was the Ciutadella Pompeu Fabra campus. This is the last place of my employment, with whom we are still, I could say, collaborating on finishing up on some things. One of the things is, last manuscripts that are in the process because they're much longer than our employment, but also the documentary, which is being assessed by the ethical committee. So we are in some process with the university still, even if I left and I finished my project, my employment, so my salary basically. I chose this campus, I think, because it's my last employment place, because we have things going on regarding those two aspects, the documentary and how the documentary relates to this scene that exploded right now, and the genuine concern, as well as inspiration from this person she sends across the continent. And I'm not the only one inspired. And reading the news, I'm just feeling I'm one of many now. So thank you for this ground. So what I did, I entered the campus. I just asked two friends, close friends, would you support me with this? And they said, I'll be there for you, after they freaked out completely. One of them asked me even, Georgie, did you check all the legal implications? Because I'm afraid. And I was like, you will say you don't know me if anyone corners you. You are just one of the many. Me, I'm not going to look them up, because if I do, I'm not going to do one such crazy thing to do. Finally, we agreed. The both of them said, I will be there for you, George. You're so courageous and unbelievable, and I want to be there. I mean, I signed this day on the calendar of my life, that type of situation, because it's not a situation you feel and hear about every day in its tragedy, but also in its, in its spontaneity, the way it came to me, the idea. So we entered the campus. I've asked one of those two friends to write on me all the political messages on my back. People ask me why your back. There's many reasons to that we can speak about. And the point was to immediately remove my clothing. And I only had a lipstick, the same I wrote on my back with, and a small mirror, which my friend brought me before the staging. We've arrived, they looked in my face, Georgie, can you do this? Are we doing it? I thought I was gonna die for a second, but I didn't, and I did it. What happened? So running through the memories, what happened was that a minute later, really soon after, a guard crosses the yard, because I did it in the middle of the yard. Imagine like a square with people on the sides everywhere, bar, cafe in an angle. And in the middle, people, you see this guard crossing the yard towards you, pointing at you on the phone, nervous, and coming with an attitude towards you. Ah, señorita, que no puede estar aquí, blah, 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 like yelling at you, like you have to dress up, blah, 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 in Spanish, right? And me, I do speak Spanish, but I was kind of like, can you speak in English? I understand, I would think better than I speak, but okay. I told him, well, the one thing I was so proud of, I told him, I am busy putting on my lipstick. I took my lipstick and I was putting on my lipstick, not moving. He goes right back to my friend who was filming from 3-4 meters behind and starts harassing her to shut the camera down. And she's like, leave me alone, man. And she's actually a local, so she had a strong ground. Are you with her? He started interrogating her. She was like, I don't know, I'm just like everyone else here. She was responding things like this. She told me he never left her alone the whole few hours that we were around there.
Oh, wow.
And then
a few hours.
You see the guard calling more reinforcement. 3 guards arrive, like we were surrounded by guards. And then you see this naked woman who doesn't move, her friend, who you don't know if it's her friend, doesn't move, and another one taking wide angles. So it was really incredible. At that point, I think there was a dynamic where it was obviously when the authority and with these batons, like a very physical law enforcement type of level, but none of them have approached me, touched me physically. I think they can't do this, especially because there is a gender problem. All the guards are male, and then there are those women who don't move. You can't touch them either. But I didn't know in that moment. When I was putting on my lipstick, my hand was trembling, actually. And I even approached a student and I said, is my lipstick okay? You think?
Oh my God.
Yeah, scared.
Yeah, so the students came around you as well.
Yes, so at some point, those guards tried to get me out. I walked with them, then I tricked them and walking in another direction. They were like my ghosts around the campus. But at some point they established a distance and called the administration, and they were standing 10 meters away, but always surrounded and looking at me and being there. And in that lapse that they gave me this distance, because students were confused, a naked woman surrounded by guards, what is happening? I believe. But when they took 10-meter distance from me, being present, but not on me, not on my neck, right? Not on us physically. That's when students started approaching me, and it was really incredible, an incredible experience. So I saw a student crossing the yard, coming to me and asking me, what is this about? I explained, he shook my hands and he says, that's cool. Then at some point, other students approached me, and those stayed until the end, even when the police came, actually, because at some point the police came. Meanwhile, the administration came down, 2 women at that point, who came down twice and informed me that this is not compliant with the rules and regulation of the university, and so they have to call the police so that I'm taken away. And I start addressing them. Is this the right thing to do? I mean, do you feel like you need to do this to me? Why is a woman with just her lipstick and a crown of flowers a danger to anyone? So I was a little bit teasing, and they were nice in saying it's not about what I think, but also it's something that you do. It made me think a little bit about, the banality of evil that Hannah Arendt talks about, where you're just enforcing rules. Really, any rule that there is, just because it's a rule. So maybe that needs to have a conversation. Maybe I'm forcing a conversation on that. Just because it's a rule might not actually be even moral, but, or right. Or in fact, I was standing for justice. If you want to put it in the debate that I'm addressing, I was actually using freedom of expression to a much higher goal and to questioning the situation. In fact, some students very brilliantly, one of them told me, this was an incredible thought experiment for us, much better than being in classroom and working on the essay we're stressing about. And I was thinking, well, that's also necessary that you do, but it's so good that you're open to see what forced experience in a way brings you to understand around the cause, around rules, around the structure, around the positioning of, authority, law enforcement, and bodies, which is
Yeah.
at the end what I'm working on and interested in,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Anyway, when the police came, at some point, when the police came, I think at that moment the students were facing the police coming from my back, and they told me the police is here. At that point, they knew me, they had my data, they checked me on the website. They were thinking, you have such a cool profile. Oh my God, the amount of things you've done. At that point, I was even a teacher to their eyes. They were young and they were like, they couldn't believe what was happening around them. And one of them told me, Georgiana, the police is behind you and coming towards you. I think for a second I lost it. I was like, I don't know, my change face. In that moment, the students were fully solidary with me in saying, don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. Everything is fine. It's very cool what you're doing, what you're calling attention at and for. And one of them went and got me water. Like at that point, I was scared for, and one of them even said, is it appropriate to give you a hug? And they all hugged
Ah,
me. At that point, it was really, 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 really incredible. But
wow.
I have to say that, like in my documentary, my experience has been very similar. So, and it goes back to your first question around how my relationship changed with academia. A minority of people will be blown away by this kind of content and unite in that on that very genuine base. Like I was describing these students who didn't want to move. I didn't ask them to. They were there until the police released me. It was really incredible. And they were caring and they were involved and they wanted to be there. They didn't want to go to class. They said, even I want to go and talk to the student union and I want to talk to my professor in class about what happened. So taking it in a way, um, uniting in a very deep sense.
Yeah.
But the other thing that struck me as complete opposite is also what I've experienced with documentary. I want to describe it in my only way of communicating was with my eyes. I was just looking for anyone who gives me a smile, an acknowledgement, or just crosses my eyes while I'm walking around, right? I was impressed by the amount of people who, that very second one eyes are about to meet, but then one of them disappears out of that meeting, looks in the void rather. I've seen a lot of that, including colleagues I knew. They
Mm.
saw me and walked past me, and so many students. So you see what we are producing in the university psychologically, this being there but disappeared in a way, uncommunicative in a way, in a very important way. And I think that kind of feeling froze me quite a lot. It made me feel it was a different feeling from feeling safe. So when I was practicing nudity in order to get back my body, it was helping me that I was in such a respectful place where no one was looking at me. That was the case in the North, where there is a very open-minded conception around that, from which I've learned. But in the university, it was different because when you see a person you've spoke to, you ate food with, you discussed matters such as the ones in the documentary. They know you've made the documentary. When you see them working, this is not indifference. This is something else.
Mm.
I don't even know if they know what it is. It would be cool to figure out.
Yeah.
How can you actually walk like this, like you don't know the person when you actually really do?
Mm.
And so in a way, it also describes how I'm positioned right now in academia. A lot of people are in this situation, and I thought about it. What would that be? How can I define that? In this avoidance, in this fake indifference. But because I know people for 10 years, I know they know me.
Yeah.
What is that about? I think it's related to the fear of actually uniting with someone like you, or the fear of taking a stance themselves. it has to do with this fear, with what conditioned them in this disappearing in an eye meeting only. I requested with my eyes, not even verbally and in any way, right? So there is a lot of that. Right now, I'm controversial, I feel. It's all those who, for all sorts of reasons, maybe because agree but don't have the courage to openly or disagree, will take that fake indifference face and attitude. But those who approach me really stay. It's the minority, I feel, but feel like they said it themselves. They feel is so much more important than that paper they were stressing on all day. So yeah, I don't know if
Yes.
you want to ask me some more details. I'm happy to go because yeah, for me, I'm going on a yeah.
Quite a journey. Yes, I love it. I mean, I know we're already over an hour. So yeah, I mean, it's quite new, and I love your understanding of the impact that it's had. You know what I mean? So I think like I'm looking forward to what's next because I feel like a lot of what you're doing is pushing boundaries and getting people to look at things in a different light and to question, you know, what those students were questioning, right? Like, what do I know about, you know, a person who's, you know, una profesora, you know, and, you know, a researcher, like, what do I know about you know, about this system and questioning that. So, yeah. What's next for you, do you think?
It's really unknown right now, Luna, and I myself really don't know. I'm stuck in between, in this in betweenness where my heart is in academia and for academia. With everything I've done everything that I thought genuinely is good for us all, so to speak, and for me first, because it's not pure altruism. I think it's healthy actually to be that way. I wanted my own healing and that of everyone around me because so many just keep on falling and we can't talk about this situation, right? So I wanted better, but like I said, could be that we are not ready as a society and as an academic institution to hear and talk about it. This produces its own effects of retracting from me all my opportunities, and I feel that this is something I'm facing right now. Not I feel, I actually do. And in part because of how the system works, allowing this so very easily to work you out from the back door. Examples of that: screenings were no longer, what didn't go on at any point in the process, either before making it into the program, after talks, or after making it into the program for unknown reasons, properly unjustified reasons. One of the last things of this kind is the university canceling my Erasmus Plus grant that was going to fly the documentary to be presented in Argentina. And so the grant was taken away from me on a very bureaucratic reason, such as because your employment has finished and you would be using that grant afterwards. The rule is that always the rule, right? Always the rule. And so you basically, one by one, are taking away all my tools, even those that I had already on my table through hardship, because I've raised from zero into making it to going wider. And so obviously that had an impact on me because I felt extremely destabilized by things being taken away from me and all of that. But at the same time, when I say my heart is in academia and for academia, is that I can't give up. Like, I just walked naked in the campus. I think if they don't get it now that I'm not gonna give up, they won't get it anymore.
Yes.
So I'm in this in-betweenness where I'm trying to find my place psychologically, and I'm taking good care of myself, like we discussed about this radical well-being, and I'm being very careful and even selfish around keeping my boundaries and speaking if I'm ready, do when I'm ready. And very interestingly, I now, in a way I can, because I'm not in academia, so stressed by all those, infinite tasks. So for some time, I have the luxury of being able to push back and not respond, not do things that I'm not ready for. But I am very much aware that I will have to be very soon ready to walk in a direction, because I need to support myself. I'm not coming from a rich family who has maintained me through my studies or will maintain me in my 40s. Wouldn't even be fair. What kind of a society do we have for an individual at that point, with all their achievements, to not be able to stand on their own 2 feet like I've done my whole life?
Yeah.
So ideally, if the work works with me, I'd be the kind of professor that really teaches different things with different methods, and that's fine. And I'll push this conversation right back in through any door that is possible. I raise more sympathy to the courage that everyone has shown in uniting in this. And I know there is sympathy, but there is also this barrier of what people do with it. They don't feel entitled or even fearful to unite, right? I don't know how I will be able to negotiate those boundaries. And I don't know for how long I can also last. I'm a person and we're talking about a system. But I've made it so far, and that's because people like you joined with their time, the participants joined, reviewers joined, so many people wanting us and fighting within their own departments to have us screened.
Yes.
And maybe if we can get to a point where a new wave of energy drags us in again. We're also young, we're so scared, we're also scared. We also have these feelings, we're not, If that happens, then the next stage is just continuing on. What that means for me professionally, I have no idea. So right now I only have doors closed in my face. But if people see the point, maybe it's less possible for doors to be so easily closed, right?
Absolutely.
If people who listen to it wants to invite us, then we don't charge for it. But yes, if you want us in person, we expect our expenses to be covered, which happened in so many occasions. Sometimes in Vienna, for example, they invited the full team and gave a small honorarium, which was barely enough for the expenses. But the willingness of someone to put their own project funding towards one such young invitation was revolutionary. And that didn't happen to me when I was 19. So I'm also happy that I brought young people to be invited in European institutions with their first job on their first year at the university as well, right? That was really helpful. I think it depends on how people respond to us from now on. I have to say, my professional and personal life, in a way, is very much related to how the world now takes us, really. I still have courage and willingness to go on.
I want to end with, and I think I prepared you for this question. What's on your playlist? What is the music that you're dancing to? Because I know dancing was a big part of your recovery as well. What's your song that you want to share with the world as well?
A song. Actually, I don't remember. We spoke about it so many times. Luna, I want to ask your permission to say one thing about the former point. I don't want to just be hired myself. I want to change things for everyone else. Hiring me would help me push this forward. And also, I wanted to say, within my team, I'm not the only precarious person. So we all need protection, support. We need 3 things. Be listened and heard. We only want to talk about what's good for us all, and we don't have those responses, nor should we. We only bring a conversation. So hear out, get us in, hire us, because we need to live just like all of you do. and not just me, us, and protect us if you can. We need a safe space, and we need not closed, we don't need bubbles, safe space. That I understood in the process is not useful at full potential, because we end up in small bubbles. We need to enlarge the safe space. So yes, please be our guardians, to say it with Plato. We need guardians for the safe space, enlarging the conversation. And that's when it's going to be for everyone's good, because that's the intent here, right? We're on fire, but for that reason, that's our end goal. We want to, for example, when it comes to mental illness, the end point is we want to get there and talk about it as a fact of life and as something we deal with, not something we press out. We no longer want people to fall through the cracks of society unobserved, alone, while they're part of that society. It's just not that's not the best way humanity can, the form in which humanity can exist. And so that's where we're aiming. And on the music, so the music fell on my lap, so to speak, on a day I was taking a walk. I like walking. I've also done the Camino de Santiago when I finished this project for that reason, to just expand, feel, reconnect with my body, rewire all the tensions and the fear and everything that I felt, integrated and help myself in that way. But the dance fall into my place on a very regular way. I started practicing what they called ecstatic dance, and right now one of the teachers calls it flow. It has to do with free expression, really, at the end. It doesn't have to do with any style. It has to do with you going on a journey with yourself, safely with other people. When I say safely, is because a lot of the work done, directly or not, is on the boundaries. So you dance alone. By you dance alone can be you stomping your feet on the ground, jumping up and down, screaming if you want to, and sometimes there is a collective doing things together, because one gives inspiration, and what people can do together without any coordination is incredible. But boundary setting, because no one can dance with you if you don't want. Just a simple gesture like this says thank you for wanting to be next to me, but also sending back, I'm taking my space. And a lot of developing a lot of these signs, and that's also something that's recurrent, I think, in the documentary and in how we should lead life. Well, for me, it's been healing. Became part of the documentary, and I don't propose this as everyone should do it. That's part of my journey. But I do think part of anyone's journey out there should be related also to where are their safe spaces, where do they release on the tensions, on the situations of their life. And definitely I can say that without ecstatic dance, which became a practice in the last years in my life, probably I wouldn't have had the strength, because I did have, supervisory weeks, meetings with my supervisor, discussing all the issues, all the problems, making decisions with their support and advice. But there is also a need, I think, for every one of us to release tension without that being related at all with our jobs. And that space is more and more crushed in our society, because we are just on this rat race and automatic pilot constantly, right? So I think we need, with force and determination, try to carve back space for doing nothing, for example, for dancing, for doing sports and all the things. It was so important for the Greeks, for all the ancient philosophers, that our health should be always in check, right? Mente sana, corpo sano, right? I think we should go back at that. But then we need to resist a little bit more, resist more the pressures that come from this productive system that sees us as these little robots, or right? And we need more resources so that we don't have to do 2, 3 jobs to survive.
Yes.
And we need to protect that space for developing at a social level, at a personal level, at the health basic level of the individual and of a society. I think that's where I'm aiming. And I've done that even if I was yelled at. I let down some people. I had to.
Yeah.
I had to. After I completed my activities, there were more bureaucratic needs for this, that, a million things. I'm like, no, right now is my time to take space. And that is in seeing the people who, like me, responding nervously to that, it informs me that they didn't yet get to the idea themselves that they too are entitled to do that. I'm not doing that to them. I'm doing that for them. I'm already practicing what I'm preaching. So yeah, let's get there together, because alone, I mean, come on, it's boring. As a matter of fact, I'm comfortable to say maybe I've acted crazy or insane in an insane world, but it came from reflection, deep reflection, not from the spur of a moment, my act. So yeah,
Yes. That's
I should be
powerful.
processed for intending it if they want to process me for that.
Yes.
Because that's the truth.
It's
As the
powerful.
documentary came from reflecting deeply and sitting with pain and with all that I felt that I didn't know how to make a sense of. Yeah.
Yes.
Existence in Audi.
Existence. Thank you so much. Where can people find you before we say goodbye?
Yes.
Pussy.
Luna. So our website is going to be removed because we finished the fund. We can't afford it right now. We're trying to find a cheaper option and moving on with a new website. Right now, I think it's still online. It's academicpussy.com. I think it will be clear in the upcoming months when we will relaunch again what the new website will be. We'll make announcements about it. For now, we exist just a little bit undercover, just a little bit trying to put up with all this, let's say, lack of instruments and lack of sight of what's new for many of us, not just me. But we exist and we resist. So we will be back there with announcements.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Georgie. It's been so lovely. This has been such an invigorating conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Luna. Thank you for everything and for being in my life for the last 2 years. It really contributed to the game. It made the game. So thank you so much, Luna.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing you with the documentary in the UK.